I believe the American dream is anti-blackness, specifically anti-African American anti-blackness, and that dream can be sold to anybody, including black people. Historically, African Americans have been the crust of the American apple pie, the bottom crust, that is. Go back to that other video for a better explanation. But as we've talked about in other videos, racism is a scavenger ideology. It's constantly adapting and mutating so that it can survive with the times. But over time, as parts of that crust have gained more mobility, one of the fundamental floorboards of the entire pie is essentially being uprooted. And so the ideology that defines, or rather justifies, the entire pie's existence has to reshape itself. Because the identity we formed is partly wrapped up in the experience of being the crust, and the bottom crust being defined by everything that's on top of it pressing down, I think the rest of the pie, especially in boardrooms related to music and entertainment, seek every opportunity to over-exaggerate that aspect of the crust's identity, while at the same time conflating African American identity with other black diaspora identities, so that if there is upward mobility for any of those identities, it can be labeled as African American upward mobility while actually still keeping so many of us in the crust. An example that might ruffle some feathers being if you go to an Ivy League school and you see a lot of the black students, many of them are first or second generation Caribbean or West African or just African in general. And there's a lot fewer African Americans in those environments than you would think. But going back to the shared trauma of chattel slavery in the context of the United States, I think there's a concerted effort on the part of white audiences and also those people in positions to determine what gets marketed to audiences to overemphasize trauma as an aspect of the black American or the African American experience. And that's the exact reason you see someone like Drake thinking in order to be able to successfully assimilate the African American experience, he has to talk about an absent father or put himself in proximity to people who claim to have been drug dealers or killers. Like it's a caricature and a stereotype that is being accepted as a cultural identifier, and it's being pushed externally in the same way that this particular aspect of African American identity is a result of an external force to some degree or another. And at this point in history, we can't say that that shared traumatic experience isn't part of the African American identity, because if that were the case, it would be something that someone can assimilate.